Are you sick of the same old sports talk radio shows? Then tune in Sunday mornings from 11 to noon and listen to the Sports Skillet Radio Show. We cover a wide variety of sports topics, and we'll have special guests and calls from our listeners. If you are over it, bored to death, and have had enough of the routine sports talk, tune in to Sports Skillet Radio Sundays from 11 to noon. Sports talk served up with hot sauce. And we are back live on the Sports Skillet Radio Show. And today in the studio we have
Larry,
Ethan.
All right. And I guess we'll open up the studio lines at the top of the show. You can call in at 856-232-7077 or 856-232-7078. And we'll be discussing a wide variety of sports topics today. We got basketball, college and pro, hockey, baseball, you name it. It's on pro wrestling, you name it. It's all on the table today. I guess what most people are talking about today is the NCAA tournament and how the brackets are being shredded as there have been a lot of upsets going on. How are you guys doing in your college brackets?
Well, so far, my Final Four is still intact, which is good. Syracuse, I have in my Final Eight, and so that was a major hit yesterday. But otherwise, my bracket's still holding tight. I think at this point, as long as your Final Four is still in, you're in good shape.
Yeah, my Elite Eight is still in, so I'm good. No, I lost Villanova. That's it.
Not bad. Of course, I have UCLA, Arizona, MSU, and Louisville as my Final Four. And I have Louisville winning the whole tournament. But there have been a lot of upsets so far in the tournament going on.
I think you saw a class act when Mercer beat Duke, with Coach K going in and talking to the Mercer kids. Even though the Mercer kids came out and said, that was part of the highlight of their tournament is Coach K coming in.
Oh, definitely. I definitely think so. And we had Syracuse getting upset last night in a nail biter that came down to really the last shot.
Yeah, it was a really, really intense game. I was watching something on Netflix and I was watching the score and I had to turn off what I was watching to watch the end of the game. It just giving me agita. I don't have Syracuse going past my Sweet 16, but that was intense.
Oh, it really was. And that, I think, busted some people's pools.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think between Mercer and Syracuse, Mercer winning and then Syracuse losing, that killed a lot of brackets. Who would have thought number 3 would be out this early? Who thought Duke would be out this early? It's just but that's what this tournament's about, and that's what keeps it going every year.
Oh, definitely. I'm one for the upsets too. I love it when a smaller school upsets a bigger, more well-known school. I love seeing the college fans celebrate in there and everybody going crazy because, hey, we made it to the next round when they weren't expected to, like a Harvard or something, a school like that making it to the next round.
Yeah, well, a couple of years ago, that's what brought the VCUs up to the top of the pile. A couple of other schools, and then didn't I think Stephen F. Austin beat VCU this year.
Yeah, that messed me up. I had VCU in my.
I think everybody did. So that's what keeps this going. That's why this tournament is one of the biggest sporting events of the year. I mean, this is right up there with Super Bowl weekend. And,
definitely.
I think I read somewhere that this is the 3rd highest betting event in Vegas. After Super Bowl, and I can't remember what the other one is, but it's Super Bowl, there's something else, and March Madness are the top 3 betting events, and that's what keeps it going. I mean, these upsets are incredible. You know, a few years ago you had George Mason was the Cinderella, and then go back a few more years before Gonzaga was there all the time. I mean, they were the Cinderella for a couple of times, so it's nice to see, and I'm interested to see where Mercer goes with this.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing where Dayton goes. I mean, they beat OSU, they beat Syracuse. They just took out 2 of the top teams. I mean, I had them beating OSU. I've done pretty well with upsets in the first round. I took Dayton, I took Harvard, I took North Dakota State. I just didn't have them going anywhere.
To make up for last year?
Yeah, to make up for last year, because last year I had Georgetown winning it all, and that was an ill-advised choice. But I'm interested in seeing where Mercer goes. I mean, they proved that they can beat some top talent, and so we'll see what happens.
And what I like too is some of the stories that come out. Like, I had never heard of the 2 towering Canadian brothers, Avtar and Brenda Bolar. They're both standing 7 foot tall, weighing 300 pounds, and I'm watching them in the tournament, and they're just like a brick building. And I'm saying that some team, they may not be a high draft choice, but some team is going to take them, even if they're just average players. Some team in the NBA is going to take them just because, kind of like Manute Bol, kind of like they can just stand under the basket and just rebound.
Right.
And or Shaquille O'Neal, something like that.
Well, I think Shaquille O'Neal's a whole different type player. But, you know, Manute Bol, who was, he was about 110 pounds soaking wet, but he can get down the court in 3 steps. I saw these guys, and I think one is 7'3", and the shorter one is 7'2".
When you're short of the brothers and you're 7'2", wow.
Exactly, and they were on New Mexico State. And just when they came out onto the court, well, the one brother is a redshirt. It wasn't playing at all, so you only got to see. I think it's Verinda Bolar playing in the tournament, but I can see next season when both of them are on the court at the same time. It would just be massively difficult to try and shoot around them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you're that tall, you can block anything. You just have to, go on your toes and you take everything out.
Yeah, well, and then going, to the NBA, listen, you have all these teams that need to sell tickets, and, these guys would sell some tickets, like the 76ers. But
you want to talk about guys that can sell tickets, and for some reason I cannot remember his name, but there's a player down in the D League. He's so tall he can dunk without jumping. He can do a flat foot dunk.
That is amazing. And that's what I'm saying. Some of these stories that come out of the tournament are just absolutely crazy when they get noticed and they get airtime, and all of a sudden they wind up making it into the NBA. Yep. And did you guys hear about Fran McCaffrey too? How he had to leave the team in a tournament. His son was going through an operation. He left the team, and this is another one of those awesome stories that you would never hear about if not for the tournament. He leaves the team, goes to visit his son in the hospital. His son is having an operation, comes back, and his team in the NCAA tournament. And what was really great is the show of appreciation at the end of the game. He ended up losing the game, but the show of support by the Tennessee player, because his team was playing Tennessee, the show of support by the Tennessee players after they got done their little celebration for winning their game, they went over and they all hugged Fran McCaffrey and shook his hand and showed their support for him. Outstanding, and that's another great aspect of this NCAA tournament too.
Yeah, I think the brotherhood that you see and the appreciation for everybody there, it's something. They understand what it's like to be in this tournament and how tough it is, let alone to have all these personal things going on outside of the tournament. They, it's a brotherhood. It brings them together. It's wonderful to see. Again, same thing with Coach K going into the Mercer locker room. These kids in Mercer, I'm sure, had absolutely no thought that they would be able to beat Duke. And, so that on top of the sportsmanship that a Coach K shows, or that this Tennessee team, shows towards opposing coaches, it brings that brotherhood together. This is a grueling tournament for these kids. They fly in, they're there for 2 days. Most of them fly out that night or the next morning, and these are college students. So it's a grind for them on this tournament, and so they feel the pain. They know what it's like, and to have something like that going on in the meantime, and for them to show that kind of sportsmanship is incredible.
Yeah, I think the camaraderie is amazing. I mean, you can be an amazing player, but if you're a jerk, then no one likes you. You can be an player, but if you're a great guy and you're always shaking your teammates' hands and you're shaking the other team's hands and congratulating everybody, win or lose, people are going to like you.
Right.
I mean, it's so much better when they're friendly with each other, when they're helping each other out, as opposed to mocking each other and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, absolutely. And once again, I just want to remind everybody that we're taking your calls, 856-232-7077 or 856-232-7078. If you'd like to call in and weigh in with your question or comment about any sports topic, we'll be taking your calls. We'll also touch on the Phil Jackson situation. He was just signed by the New York Knicks to be the grand poobah and the czar of the Knicks. And I know you guys are big New York fans.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting situation, and to be seen what he can do. But just bringing his name along brings credibility. Everybody's saying, "Oh, look, the Knicks have gone on an 8-game run since this talk has started." Well, the Knicks have gone on runs this year. They won 7, lost 5, won 6, things like that. So that's the way the season's going, and they're still kind of looking up at the playoffs at the moment. But Phil Jackson brings that credibility. Now, what can he do? We'll see. Will he eventually end up coaching this team, or be perceived to be coaching the team? I think it's anytime you hear the head coach say, "Well, I'd be interested in learning how to teach the triangle if that's what Phil wants to do," kind of makes it seem like Phil's going to coach this team. The Knicks have a lot of issues, and the Knicks need to figure it out. Right now, they're enjoying playing together, and you can see that. Having fun out there in the basketball season, having fun is important. The chemistry is important because, again, like I was saying with the NCAA tournament, how grind it is. Unlike baseball where there's a 3-game series, these guys fly into a city, get off the plane, take a nap, go shoot around, take a nap, go play, get on the plane again. And that's 80-something games a season.
82 games a season.
So, right now they're playing together. They like each other. In a Phil Jackson kind of scenario, Melo's got to share the ball more. We'll see if that's possible. But it's going to be interesting. I think next year will be very interesting to see what happens.
I mean, I'm on the side that I'm not sure Phil Jackson can really save the Knicks. I think they're a little too messed up. But if anybody has a chance, it is Phil Jackson. I mean, you can just tell how respected he is. Okay, Mike Woodson said he'd be learn a new system to coach. Carmelo Anthony, who in my mind is one of the most selfish players in the game right now, said, "I would be willing to learn and take criticisms from Phil Jackson. That just shows you how much he means to this team. But we'll have to see what he does. I think the only way he can really save the team is if he does end up actually coaching it, which I'm not sure he will do, but I think that's his best chance of saving the team.
At the very least, I think what this Phil Jackson thing does, and for anybody who's been a New York fan or a Knick fan is thankful for, is it takes Dolan out of the picture. Hopefully.
Yeah.
That's the key word. Hopefully.
I mean, this whole project can go down in flames if Dolan doesn't give up enough power. Because I'm not a fan of Dolan. Dolan tries to control a team even if he doesn't understand what he has to do, and that's a huge problem. Phil Jackson knows exactly what he has to do. Dolan has no idea, but Dolan will still work at it and keep going until he either does it right or completely messes it up, and that's just not a good way to run a team. I mean, he has to give complete or at least almost complete control to Phil Jackson for this to be successful.
Yeah, I think Dolan has taken a lot of heat over the years. Never as much as he's getting right now with this team. Even when Isaiah Thomas was totally screwing up the Knicks, Dolan wasn't taking this type of heat. Dolan doesn't like bad press, and I think Dolan had to do this to get everybody off of his back and to save his neck in the New York media and in public. So he had to do it, and I think he will. I think you have a similar situation. Hopefully one day Daniel Snyder in Washington will do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And to some extent, although I think he's a little more knowledgeable about his team and his sport, to some extent the same thing with Jerry Jones in Dallas. Those are the same kind of scenario. Dolan, needed to get out of that business and be an owner. He's got so many other things going on. Comcast, MSG, the Rangers, everything else. He needs to let somebody who understands basketball run that team. And when I say understands basketball, not Isaiah Thomas understanding basketball. Isaiah Thomas bankrupt a whole league and then came and destroyed the Knicks. So This is definitely a better situation than that.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I think one of the things, too, is potential free agents that are going to sign with the Knicks, like Carmelo Anthony, when he decides whether or not he's going to opt out of his contract. Has to realize that Phil Jackson is not necessarily coaching the team, although rumors have that Steve Kerr may come in and be the next head coach of the Knicks. That Phil Jackson is not going to be coaching the Knicks. He's going to be upstairs in management, and I'm sure his fingerprints are going to be all over everything that the Knicks do going forward. But he's not going to be a day-to-day type of guy. Supposedly, he's still going to be out in California and so forth. So it remains to be seen exactly how hands-on he's going to be going forward with the Knicks.
Yeah, I think that Steve Kerr will be in the mix. I actually think their better scenario would be to bring Steve Kerr in as the general manager than as the head coach. And I think that's the way it'll go. I don't think Stephen Mills is long for that position with Phil there.
If they bring in Steve Kerr as the general manager, who do you think should be head coach? Or do you think they should keep Mike Woodson?
Listen, I don't think Mike Woodson forgot how to coach in a year. Last year, they were praising Mike Woodson. He was doing a wonderful job. He turned that team around. He doesn't forget how to coach a team in a year. There's problems with that team.
Yeah. I mean, I think too much heat goes on Mike Woodson. By no means do I think he's an amazing coach, but he's definitely a good coach. He's a good coach coaching a bad team. And if you have a bad team, there's really not much you can do there. You can't take the talent he has and make it finals competitor, no matter how much you want to, no matter how much you believe Carmelo Anthony can bring them there. It just won't happen without the talent.
He's got good players. He doesn't have good players that play well together on a consistent basis. What's the major difference between last year's Knicks and this year's Knicks? Last year's Knicks had a core group of players playing for a contract. And this year they don't.
Yeah.
A lot of those guys got signed. The last 2 years, the Knicks had these guys playing for contracts, J.R. Smith and so forth. Now they don't, and I mean you can see what's happened with like J.R. Smith, who is a very good number 6 guy, So, but what happened to him? He's reverted back to some of those old selfish issues that he's had before. This is a good team, talented players, not necessarily to have this group together.
Yeah, and what you said about J.R. Smith wants to be treated like he's Carmelo Anthony when he doesn't have necessarily the talent to be Carmelo Anthony. Now, don't get me wrong, I like J.R. Smith as a basketball player. I think he's a very good sixth man. But, going back to when they cut his brother and he said they were betraying him, a team is not betraying you when they cut your brother because he's the worst player in the league. Okay, officials from every team, or people in the front office from almost every team, said his younger brother was almost not good enough to be on a D-League team. Okay, so when you aren't good enough to be playing in the D-League and you get cut from an NBA team, that's nothing personal. That's strictly business. J.R. Smith is a little full of himself. He has too much confidence for his talent level.
Very true. And a reminder once again, we are taking your calls 856-232-7077 and 856-232-7078. And speaking of some bad basketball teams, that brings us to the Philadelphia 76ers.
24 games going strong.
Exactly. Yeah. Going for the most ping pong balls you can get and setting an NBA record at the same time.
Well, and the Knicks tried 2 days ago to give them a win, and it just didn't happen. But 26 losses is the record. I think the 76ers have that well in hand. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Winless for Wiggins, they're taking that all the way.
Yes, they are, without question. They are trying to get as many ping pong balls as they can get, and it's a good way to kind of rebuild your team, though. And I think that's kind of what you have to do in the NBA. And it's kind of tied into Phil Jackson. He's kind of, I think, hamstrung a little bit with contracts and player movement, what he can do, what he can't do financially, whereas the Sixers have totally torn everything down.
Oh, yeah.
And this year do not care about wins and losses. And the funny thing is, too, normally you hear a lot of Philadelphia fans complaining about the teams losing and, oh my gosh, I can't believe how bad this team is. Like a couple of seasons ago with Andy Reid, how bad the Eagles were. Sixers, okay, do whatever you want to do. Get the ping pong balls and let's just build this team up from the ground again.
Well, I think a couple of things. I think number one, the Sixers might be the fourth team in the city.
True.
But I'm not a big fan of let's lose as many games as we can to get as many ping pong balls in the lottery as possible. I don't like that system, but it's the system that the NBA has, and they're working that system. And I'm all for working the rules to work in your favor. I just think that rule needs to be changed. I don't like it. I think it's horrible for the fans of Philadelphia or fans of any team that does that. You don't want a lost season. Listen, if you have a bad team, you have a bad team. But to intentionally have a bad team is not the way to go. I know Ethan and I are both Steeler fans, and Ethan was a big component of the Steelers should have lost out the rest of the season to get a good draft pick. The NBA has this other system. I'm just not a fan of it. This lottery, I don't think the lottery is bad. I think it needs to be fixed to stop this from happening. But you could also go and look at like a team like the Bobcats, who
they're trying and they can't.
They can't. The Washington Wizards too. I keep wanting to call them the Bullets. The Washington Wizards too. But it just hasn't worked.
The Wizards are moving themselves up.
Yeah.
But I mean, the only way tanking is really helping a team. I mean, like they're rebuilding, which is good. But the only teams that tanking is really good for are the teams, and in my mind, like the Pistons, like teams that even when they try their hardest, they are a borderline team. Okay, you cannot build a winning franchise by having a borderline team every year. Either the only way to be good is to either win it all or be horrible so you can get the guys to win it all.
Yeah, I think in the smaller markets, that's true. You look at Indiana. You look at these places like Indiana, like Detroit, that the big names are not just coming to you.
Yeah, no.
Right? Cleveland, same thing. The big names just are just not showing up at your doorstep. You've got to draft these players and keep them, right? Because you saw what happened in Cleveland, right, where they couldn't keep LeBron.
And they're going through the same thing again this year with their star player,
Kyrie Irving,
where he may be leaving the team. And again, if you're a draft pick of Cleveland, you're playing your first couple of years, first contract, and looking to get a better contract elsewhere.
If Kyrie Irving leaves the Cavaliers, they're kind of dead. I mean, it looks as if they struck out on their first overall pick in 2013 with Anthony Bennett, and when you strike out with the first overall pick, it's hard to work your way back.
Yeah, and here you have another situation where you have an owner who doesn't know enough about his business and is too involved in it.
Yeah.
In Dan Gilbert, and you saw all the missteps he took when LeBron left, and now he's kind of backtracking because LeBron's going to be a free agent, and they think they might have a chance to bring him back to Cleveland, which I doubt is ever going to happen. So but those small market teams need to rebuild through the draft. I just don't know that tearing your team down to almost nothing is the right way to do it for your fans. And while Philadelphia is technically a large market, I don't think it's considered a large market for their basketball team. Again, back in the day, back when you had the Allen Iversons and stuff like that.
And even before that with Dr. J and Moses Malone.
Yeah. Back then. But now they're just, nobody's running to Philadelphia. It's not like Brooklyn, the Nets, the Clippers, the Lakers.
Exactly.
The Texas teams. People are running there. Philadelphia, nobody's running.
No one's going to run there.
Not at the moment. Give them about another maybe year or two. If they get lucky with the draft and build a team. MCW, Michael Carter-Williams, I think is a good draft pick, a good building block. But you have to add to that. And if they can start adding to that and build that foundation, then you may be able to lure the bigger free agents, and you'll have some cap flexibility too.
Well, how many times do you think a team can have the Rookie of the Year or somebody in the Rookie of the Year running and still be the worst team in the league, and these players want to stay there? All right?
Exactly.
Because Michael Carter-Williams is probably going to be the Rookie of the Year. The 76ers are probably going to have the worst or one of the worst records. Now, if they get the number 1, number 2 pick next year, and you have a guy who has a legitimate chance of being the Rookie of the Year, and what if they're bad again? And what if that happens again in 2 years? It's and a guy like Michael Carter-Williams, who is talented, who's used to winning, this at a young age, at an impressionable age, continuing to lose like that is not going to go well for him.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think it's going to take more than a year or two. I think what they're going to need to do is that they can get these good players to the draft and then prove that they can keep them there. I mean, if I'm a big-name free agent, I'm not going to go to the team that's winning right now with all rookies that are at the end of their contract. I'm going to go sign somewhere else for maybe 2 years, wait until they run out their contracts, and then if they stay, I'll go there.
Yeah, well, in the meantime, getting back to their record of 24 losses, trying to get to 27. They play San Antonio on Monday.
Loss.
They play, I believe, Houston on Wednesday.
Loss. That ties the record right there.
Yeah, so that ties the record. So, I'm sorry, they play Houston on Thursday. And then, let's see here. Well, they have a bunch of days off, so they get some rest. So those are their next two. So those are their 2 losses that'll tie the record. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Will be. And again, we are taking your calls, 856-232-7077, 856-232-7078. If you want to chime in and discuss whatever on your sporting mind. Another big topic going around this weekend is the Jets signing of Michael Vick to a 1-year deal worth $5 million. And
they've told me I can't make any dog jokes.
You are not allowed to make dog jokes.
No dog jokes. Okay.
No dog jokes.
So, listen, there's positive and negatives to this. It's Michael Vick is a different player than he was when he was with the Atlanta Falcons. Back when he was with the Falcons, he was a selfish player. He had a very poor work ethic. I think that has changed. He's been humbled. Andy Reid did a lot for him. He proved to be a good teammate and a good mentor last year to Nick Foles. So, I think in that regard, that's kind of what the Jets were looking for Geno Smith, somebody who can compete with him, somebody who can also try to mentor him, somebody who will be a good teammate with Geno. I think it's the right situation. I think Vick being with the Jets, being in New York, is a bad situation. I think it's another Tebow circus, kind of.
Kind of. I think it'll be scaled down a little bit. See, but as soon as they officially signed him, I saw all this stuff about they signed Vick, which means they're not handing the starting job to Smith on a silver platter, and they're not going to candy coat anything. But in my mind, Vick was never a consideration to come in and compete for the starting job. In my mind, Vick was coming in to ride the bench and teach Geno Smith. I mean, I guess you can have Vick compete for the starting job, but I feel like, first of all, if you have Vick start for them, you're hurting Geno Smith, which will hurt your team in the long run. But I think Vick will be a better mentor to Smith than he will be a starting quarterback. So I think he needs to ride the bench.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say that you bring a guy in for $5 million, although for a quarterback that's pennies.
Yeah.
But that you bring a guy in for $5 million and say, well, he's just going to be a backup.
I think the Jets are going to start Michael Vick on opening day. I think he'll beat out Geno, but that brings up a whole nother can of worms, because now if Michael Vick is a starter, because Ryan has to save his job because he's fighting for a contract extension. So obviously I think he would be leaning towards Michael Vick just because Michael Vick can win him some games at the beginning of the season. Now, Michael Vick isn't going to start every single game this upcoming NFL season. He's going to wind up getting hurt. That's been his history. He's not going to start all 16 games, but I think he'll be the starter on opening day, and that will retard, I think, the development of Geno, because now you spent I think he was a second-round pick last year.
9th pick in the second round.
9th pick in the second round. So now you're retarding the development of Geno Smith because he's riding the bench and not playing, because you have Ryan trying to win games, and I don't think that's good for the development of Geno. Now, if it's the opposite and you start Geno, then you're going to, I think, have the Jets fans, as soon as Geno starts messing up or fumbling the ball or throwing incompletions, you'll have the stadium just clamoring to put
They're going to be calling
Vick
for his
in.
head. I mean,
Yeah, I think you'll hear a lot of barking, but I think what you're going to see is if Michael Vick starts the season for the Jets, that's bad for John Idzik, because Geno was his pick.
yeah.
Right? So I think you're going to be in a situation where you've got a head coach who's looking to win games because he needs a contract, and might lean towards Vick, and a GM that needs to protect his first investment, right? And show his worth. And I think that's where you're going to see a lot of headbutting.
I mean, I'm a fan of Geno Smith, generally. I mean, he does need to develop, but I think Geno Smith should be the starting quarterback. And like you're saying, if he fails, it'll be John Idzik's head. That means in his first draft with the Jets, he will have looked to have struck out on 2 of his first 3 picks, because they selected D. Milliner 9th overall, and he has not looked very good. He's supposed to be the next Darrelle Revis, and it's not looking that way. He had Sheldon Richardson. Okay, let's give him that, because Sheldon Richardson was amazing. But D. Milliner and Geno Smith as two of your first 3 picks, and you're striking out on them, that looks really bad on your resume.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of news this past week about John Idzik and some frustration in pulling the trigger. They lost out on Rogers Cromartie to the Giants, and the word on the street was that he was the Jets to have. Idzik is just very slow to pull the trigger on contracts and things of that nature. So it's going to be interesting to see where this Geno Smith, Michael Vick thing goes.
Oh, without question. And they lost out on Darrelle Revis again because Darrelle Revis was a free agent. And he only signed a 1-year deal with the Patriots. So they could have brought him back. And the Jets have a lot of cap flexibility. They're one of the teams that have the most amount to spend under the NFL salary cap. So they could have brought in Darrelle Revis. And Ryan is a defensive coach, so that would have kind of worked within his system again. Would have juiced up the Jets fans a little bit. And if you bring in Darrelle Revis, you bring in Michael Vick, then all of a sudden I think the Jets are maybe a borderline playoff team.
But with Darrelle Revis, I don't really think that's John Idzik's fault. Because if you're Darrelle Revis, do you really want to go to the Jets? I mean, if you can go to the Patriots and go to a team that has a really good chance of going to the Super Bowl, are you going to choose the Jets over them? I mean, think about it logically.
Yeah, I think the Patriots were an interesting choice for him. I think he'll have although Belichick does a good job of kind of managing that kind of stuff, but I think him and Belichick will butt heads. I wouldn't have put it past Revis to go back to the Jets. I think, if the money was there, he would have done it. I think it's a lot about money. I've met him. Yeah. I've spoken to him. It's all about money. And his agents, it's all about the money. So,
which is why I think he only signed a 1-year deal.
Right.
So that way, and he had some injuries concerns too. So I think one of the reasons he signed the 1-year deal is, once again, prove that he's healthy, prove that he's a shutdown cornerback. He's still one of the elite corners in the league, and then go back out on the open market again next year and try to land another lucrative contract with the highest bidder. I don't think with Darrelle Revis it's about necessarily the team, although I think that probably plays a little part in it. I think it's about the money with Darrelle Revis more than anything else.
I agree. I think the Jets need to continue to focus on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
They probably need another wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was reading this morning that they've got their eye on
DeSean Jackson.
There you go.
Everyone has their eye on DeSean Jackson.
But again, do you want to put another guy who's inherently disgruntled in that organization where they make players disgruntled?
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know how much of a fit that is, but it'll be interesting to see.
I think with Michael Vick now being on the Jets, I think that would be more of a fit. And you also have Marty Mornhinweg as the offensive coordinator. Let's not forget that. So you have a little bit more of a fit for DeSean on the Jets. And the Jets can afford to rework his contract if that's one of the issues with DeSean. They can re-sign him, rip up his current contract if they wanted to, and give him a brand new contract, make him really happy, give him King's treatment, whatever he wants. And now you have a situation where you sign the wide receiver from the Denver Broncos, Eric Decker. You now have DeSean as the number 2, so kind of like the Eagles were operating last year. You have the speedy wide receiver on the outside and the bigger receiver maybe working the middle of the field with Eric Decker. You have Michael Vick as your starting quarterback, which means maybe teams have to spy on him a little bit more because Vick does still have his running ability. So it makes it a little bit different if DeSean is added to that offensive mix of the Jets.
But here's my concern about that is, DeSean Jackson is the best receiver on the Eagles at this moment, and and Chip Kelly is willing to give him away for almost nothing. So that tells you something. There's something wrong there. And is that a situation? Is that a situation you want to bring into a volatile situation in New York? And people are already going to be up in arms, with Vick. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think it's a tough fit.
Yeah, I mean, personnel-wise, I see where you're going, but I think talent-wise, the Jets would be very smart to go after DeSean Jackson for the simple reason that I think they way overpaid for Eric Decker. Eric Decker had a great year last year, but Peyton Manning was throwing to him, okay? Any receiver would look a lot better with Peyton Manning. You could bring back Lima Sweet to the NFL and he'd look like a number one wide receiver with Peyton Manning. So I think Eric Decker was paid too much money to try to be the number one on a team without such a great quarterback. So I think they need DeSean Jackson to come in to be their number one and then take a little bit of the pressure off of Eric Decker to look better.
But if you bring Jackson in, it reminds me a little bit of a Santonio Holmes situation.
Oh, I agree. But,
and you're going to have that headbutting again.
Yeah, you're going to have the headbutting, and like I said, personnel-wise, it would be a huge headache.
You might as well have kept Holmes. He would have been cheaper.
That's very true.
And like you said, you have to look, and like you were saying, you have to look on the Eagles side of the equation too. What does the loss of DeSean Jackson mean to the Eagle offense? Now, the Eagles signed Sproles to come in and be ostensibly to be a receiver and maybe a slot guy to take over for Jason Avant. That's what I was kind of looking at with Sproles. Whereas I loved Jason Avant. I thought he made a lot of clutch catches, but he didn't get a lot of yards after the catch. He would make the catch, and that would be about it. But he was clutch. He would come in on the third downs, and he would keep the drive going. Whereas I think Sproles will come in, make the catch, and get some yards after the catch. But you look at now with DeSean Jackson probably moving on, whether the Eagles trade him or release him, probably moving on. And what does that mean to the Eagle offense? Do they go into the draft and take a wide receiver now and have a young wide receiver and Riley Cooper, who there's questions about him? Was he a beneficiary of DeSean Jackson stretching the field, thus giving him a little bit more space to work underneath? You have a returning Jeremy Maclin. Again, there's questions about him. And can he come back from his surgery and still be effective and kind of a speed guy? So there's some questions there. And without DeSean on the team, I think the offense takes a little bit more of a hit. Plus, they often use DeSean on punt and kickoff returns to throw a monkey wrench into special teams. And if they need a big return, he's a key guy back there. Now you're probably looking at Sproles doing all the DeSean Jackson on special team stuff. So Chip Kelly is losing a little bit of his versatility. So, and that's one of the things in this offseason that, as I watched the Eagles go out and sign free agents, a lot of it has been versatility. They can come in, compete on special teams, and be a backup on defense, or come in Sproles' case, be a receiver on offense, and do punt and kickoff returns. So a lot of it has been versatility, and now they're getting rid of one of their most versatile players in DeSean, who, like I said, stretches the field, had a very good season last year. And there's a lot of questions about why they're getting rid of him and what this does to the Eagle offense. I think it really weakens it and has them maybe looking receiver in the draft.
Yeah, Ken, I think a Chip Kelly type offense lends itself to being able to draft a young, fast receiver type out of college that can make an immediate impact because it's so bang bang. I mean, a lot of the catches that are made in a Chip Kelly offense is more an element of the speed of the game than the guy being in the right position, the guy having the best hands. They're catching people out of out of position and things like that because of the speed of their game they play. So if Chip was able to draft a young, fast, versatile receiver, he could fill a void like that.
But here's the problem. I said it last time I was here. The Eagles are in a very weird and bad spot in the draft for them. They're picking 22. Okay, so at that point, the top receivers in the first round are going to be gone. Past that, you can reach for a guy as a number 2, but you're going to be reaching for a guy that won't be really your number 1. I mean, I guess Brandon Cooks would be good for you guys. He ran a 4.3 40. He's a fast guy. So, I mean, I don't know what receivers the Eagles would draft. Trading for Darren Sproles was weird because Darren Sproles is just like DeAnthony Thomas, who is in this draft, and he played in Oregon. He's like a halfback wide receiver mix, much like Darren Sproles. So trading for Darren Sproles means they probably won't draft DeAnthony Thomas, which I thought they would do.
That's who I was looking at too.
Yeah, DeAnthony Thomas in like the 4th or 5th round to the Eagles would be great. Because he knows the system. But with Darren Sproles, that completely negates that. So I don't really know what wide receiver you guys would get in the draft. So getting rid of DeSean Jackson really would hurt the Eagles' offense because there's nobody in free agency that can fill that void. There's no one like DeSean Jackson left in free agency unless they release him, which would be DeSean Jackson. And there's no one that's going to be available to the Eagles unless they trade up in the draft that's going to be able to take that spot. I mean, they could give up an arm and a leg and move up and try to take Sammy Watkins, which I love Sammy Watkins. I think he's an amazing wide receiver. But the Eagles would have to give up an arm and a leg.
Yeah, and I don't think they're in a position to do that.
No, not at all. So, I don't know.
I don't think they're in a position, depending on what they get for DeSean Jackson too, because apparently he was rumored to only be getting a 3rd-round pick.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
It's still better than Houston got for Schaub for starting quarterback.
Very, very true.
I said this before. If you're Matt Schaub, how does it feel to know that you got traded for the same compensation that the Jaguars got for Blaine Gabbert?
That would be a little.
That's gotta hurt right there.
That would be like a little bit of a dagger going into me, especially when you look at where the Texans could wind up next season. I mean, they got a new head coach. They're going to have a new quarterback in there, and assuming they do well in the draft, they could wind up contending for a playoff spot.
Oh yeah.
You think Ryan Fitzpatrick takes them to the playoffs?
No, not at all. I said before, they traded Matt Schaub and they signed Ryan Fitzpatrick, and everyone's like, okay, they signed a quarterback. Now they can go with Jadeveon Clowney with the 1st overall pick. If Ryan Fitzpatrick is the guy you signed to be your starting quarterback, there is a major problem. You need to take a quarterback with number 1 overall. Just no doubt about it. Ryan Fitzpatrick cannot be the guy.
Johnny Manziel?
I mean, if I'm the GM of the Texans, as soon as the draft order was announced, I gave my draft card to Goodell with Teddy Bridgewater with his name on it. But,
But here's what we were talking about off the air, is that a lot of these teams that are high in the draft that were looking to take a quarterback with their first pick have now signed these placeholder quarterbacks, like your Matt Schaub, like Ryan Fitzpatrick, and so forth. Now I'm thinking that maybe some of these quarterbacks start dropping a little bit because teams are looking at them and thinking that maybe they're 2nd-round picks or late 1st-rounders, and your Bridgewaters, your Johnny Manziels may be dropping a little bit, and teams are looking to go maybe defense or wide receiver in the 1st round.
I can see quarterbacks dropping, and conceivably, this would be an extreme case, but I could see the first quarterback going off the board at number 8 to the Vikings. With the wide receivers and the tackles and everything. But I think guys will drop, but not that much. With the signing of Ryan Fitzpatrick, for me, now that means the Texans should go for Blake Bortles, who I'm not such a huge fan of. He's a good quarterback. If he stepped in right now, he'd be an average maybe an average starting quarterback in the NFL, but he has the potential to be so much more. But he also has the potential to be the biggest bust in the draft. So, I mean, you can draft Bortles, have him compete with Ryan Fitzpatrick for the starting job, which, I mean, I think Bortles would win that.
Now, he had a good pro day from what I heard.
Yeah, he had a very good pro day. He completed all of his passes, but he's from what I'm hearing, he's worked on his footwork and stuff like that, and he's been getting better at that. But if he doesn't fix this stuff, he will be a colossal bust, and you don't want that with your first overall pick.
Well, I think it's conceivable that Houston doesn't take a quarterback with the first pick. Oakland now has 4 quarterbacks on their roster, so they probably don't need a quarterback. So I think you're going to see a lot of these quarterbacks drop.
I can definitely see them dropping. In my mind, Jacksonville will take a quarterback.
Yeah.
At number 3 overall, especially with the Texans signing Fitzpatrick, I think it's very conceivable that they take Jadeveon Clowney. At number 2, the Rams will trade, probably so that someone can take like Greg Robinson, possibly Sammy Watkins. And then 3, Jacksonville takes a quarterback. If Sammy Watkins is still there at 4, I think that's who Cleveland takes. If not, I think they'll take a quarterback. And then 8, the Vikings can take a quarterback. And if I'm the GM of the Vikings, I'm trading up to that number 2 spot because Matt Castle's not your answer.
Right.
He don't get me wrong, I think Matt Castle can be a stopgap for a year, but beyond that, no. And everyone's talking about this quarterback class. Isn't as good as it once seemed. I disagree. I'm a big fan of this quarterback class. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of Teddy Bridgewater. But I mean, let's see what happens.
I think it's also a combination of, when you're talking about a quarterback coming out of the draft, I think it's a combination of the talent the quarterback has to begin with, and the system and the team that he goes into, and the coaching that he gets. For example, you could have a mediocre quarterback, but if he's put in the right system with the right coach and gets the right coaching and so forth, then all of a sudden his game gets elevated and he becomes even better than what he was projected to in the draft. Conversely, you could have a stellar quarterback like a Blake Bortles coming out of college and having his stock go up, and he gets put into a bad system, maybe with a defensive head coach, or the offensive coordinator isn't quite good enough, or it's just he gets into a bad situation with the team and so forth, and all of a sudden he regresses and he doesn't become everything that he could have if he went on to a better team.
Ryan Leaf? I mean,
exactly.
But also, you have to take into account the system they played in, the scheme they played in college. Because a player can look great in college because he's playing in a certain scheme. Tim Couch was insane in college, and then he goes to a pro-style offense in Cleveland, and he craps out.
Vince Young.
Yeah, Vince Young, Matt Leinart, although Matt Leinart had more problems, but Matt Leinart was the same.
Well, you know how I feel about USC
quarterbacks, I got you. But
and the quarterback I like to always bring up is Jason Campbell, formerly of the Washington Redskins. He got put into a situation where the Redskins were constantly changing head coaches, constantly changing the offense, constantly having to learn new schemes, new everything. And for a while, he was a decent quarterback. But I think because they changed everything, kept changing everything up, that he was never able to get his feet on the ground and become the quarterback that maybe he could have been otherwise.
You want to look at a quarterback that if you put him in the right system, he can play well. And if you don't, he looks horrible. Alex Smith. Right. He went first overall. He had 3 offensive coordinators in 3 years. So he looked bad with the 49ers. They trade him to the Chiefs, and he blows up.
Right.
He was great last year.
I'm not a big fan of quarterbacks coming out of college and starting. I think quarterback is the type of position where you need to sit and learn the pro game. The pro game at the quarterback position particularly is so different than a college game. In college, the amount of snaps you are minimal, and things like that. So I think they should be in a position where they sit and learn. So having quarterbacks come in and start right off the bat is not ideal. And I think, like Jay was saying, you have to have consistency. Changing head coaches and coordinators every year is not good, particularly for a quarterback.
I completely agree. And while we have a few minutes left on the show, if anybody wants to call in real quick, we'll take your call, 856-232-7077, 856-232-7078. Maybe want to end the show with a little baseball talk. And there's not really much going on with the Phillies. I mean, we got the Jimmy Rollins
yeah.
We got Mercer saga going on too. The Phillies clubhouse had to be entirely disinfected. But
that's nothing new. You kind of hear that every year. I think Kansas City had that problem last year and things like that.
Yeah.
I think that in Philadelphia, this Jimmy Rollins thing is going to be a major story. There's not much to talk about with the Phillies right now this year, and I think Ryan Sandberg's trying to send a message to Rollins, but he's got this full no trade clause, which he's holding over their head, and he's saying, I decide where I go, you don't. That's never a good stance to take if you're trying to make things work. So it's going to be interesting to see where that goes.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Anything going on with the Mets, Larry?
Well,
trade talks. That's about it.
Yeah, Ethan's probably a little bit more up on that than I am, but I think Nice left the game with elbow.
It looks like Nice is going to start on the DL. Dylan G is apparently right now the front runner for the opening day starter, which kind of scary.
Well, it's scary, but I've always been a Dylan G fan.
Oh, I'm a big Dylan G fan, but
but it'll be interesting to see if he can really hold a number one spot. But I've always liked Dylan G. I think he's a gutty player. I like the scrappy type players. I've always, growing up, I was a Lenny Dykstra, Wally Backman fan.
There you go.
I'm wearing my throwback Gary Carter jersey today. So I was always into those scrappy players. Now, were you still a
fan of Lenny Dykstra when he got traded to the Phillies?
No. Well, listen, I always liked him. Now he's behind bars, which is what happens when you go to Philly. But I'm kidding. It's going to be an interesting year. I think the Mets I think to say they're going to win 90 games this year is a huge stretch. I think we're somewhere in the low 80s. And pushing up the bottom of that National League East, we're going to fight the Phillies and the Marlins for the bottom spot in the National League, I think.
Something that could really help us would be trading for a shortstop. And I was looking at stuff yesterday.
Us and about 15 other teams.
I was looking at some stuff about trading for shortstops yesterday, and I've decided in my head if I was the GM, what I'd be willing to give up for certain guys. Chris Owings from Arizona, I would love to get, but it doesn't look like we will. Because it looks like he's going to win that starting spot, which means Didi Gregorius would go on the block, which we would be able to get cheaper. And he is not an offensive improvement over Tejada, but he's a defensive improvement. So,
yeah. Listen, I'm a Met fan, but I'm not one of those guys that comes in every year going, "This is going to be our year." I think we're a good 3 years out, easily.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah, and I think this has been one of the least. Normally, there's an excitement, a buzz going on this time of year for the start of the baseball season, but this year I'm not kind of feeling that. I'm feeling more. There's obviously a lot more Eagles talk, a lot more talk about the Sixers, talk about the Flyers as they begin their playoff push. There hasn't been a whole lot of talk about the baseball season starting, and that's probably because of where the teams are projected to finish.
Yeah, I think the National League East is not going to be a very good division, so we'll see where it goes. It's going to be tough to get through this season.
I tend to agree with you, and we're going to start wrapping up the show. We appreciate everybody tuning in and listening to us this week. You can find the podcast of today's show on YouTube. And always check out our Facebook page, The Sports Skillet Show. We appreciate everybody listening to us, and we look forward to having you listen to us once again next week.
Yep. Have a good one.
Have a good one, everybody.